Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. This is Joe with the LSA, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our webinar series. Today's webinar is titled The Secret to AdWords, Facebook, and Display ROI, Inbound Calls, and will be brought to you by our guest presenter, Blair Symes from DialogTech. During the webinar, feel free to type any questions you have in the question box on your screen, and at the conclusion of the presentation, Blair will address those questions. But before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Next slide, please. So I just want to let everyone know that this webinar will be recorded and available within about 48 hours. We'll email all registrants with a link, and you can also view our past webinars on our website by looking under the Insights tab and clicking Webinars. Next slide, please. I also just wanted to flag a few important dates for upcoming LSA events. The PLACE conference, which kind of focuses on location intelligence, proximity marketing, and indoor location. That event is heading to London in a couple weeks on June 15th, and then it'll also be in the States in New York City September 16th. And then also another event that we have coming up later in the year, the Tech Adoption Summit, which looks at the future of small business services. That heads to San Francisco November 7th. So just wanted to flag all those different dates. If you have more questions on that, you can always check out our website, thelsa.org. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. Over to you, Blair.
Great. Thanks a lot, Joe, and welcome everybody to today's webinar, The Secret to AdWords, Facebook, and Display ROI, Inbound Calls. We are covering the big three, what for many businesses is the big three digital marketing channels for a reason. Most of your spend, if you're doing digital advertising, is probably going to one, two, or all of these channels. And they're becoming incredibly competitive. So today I've got a really full agenda, a full deck, where I'm going to show you why inbound calls could actually become your secret weapon to beating the competition, driving more customers, driving better conversions at a lower cost, and overall increasing your ROI if you take the right strategy. So as Joe said, my name is Blair Symes. I'm the Director of Content Marketing at DialogTech. If you're not familiar with DialogTech, we're the leading provider of actionable marketing analytics for inbound calls. So what that means is that large brands, digital agencies, and fast-growing local businesses use DialogTech to attribute and analyze the calls they generate from all of their marketing, both online and offline. As I said, I got a full agenda. I've got a lot of examples to show of real marketers doing some of the tactics that I'm going to talk about. As Joe said, ask questions as you go. I know I sometimes tend to talk quickly, so if there's something that I went over too briefly and you want more information about it, please chat in your questions and we'll try to get to it at the end, time permitting. So with all my webinars, I do like to start with a couple slides with some stats and trends to really set the stage for the importance of the topic we're talking about. And for Facebook display and search advertising specifically, it's very obvious that why these are so important to marketers. In the U.S. alone, these three channels are driving a massive amount of digital spend. You can see here from the charts to the left the growth in that spend from 3 years ago to the expected spend this year. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars being allocated towards these three digital ad channels. A 64% increase in U.S. Digital spend for these three channels in the past 3 years. So we're talking about a massive amount of money. And with that, the more money that you invest, whether you're an agency or a local business or a multi-location brand, the more money that you invest in these channels, the more pressure there is for you to optimize your ROI. So I think if for most businesses, taking a data-driven approach to optimizing digital ad ROI looks something like this. These are the 5 basic steps that most businesses can follow for data-driven approaches to optimizing ROI. So the first, obviously, is you're investing your marketing budget into paid search, Facebook, display advertising, and from that you are generating conversions. Now these conversions can differ based on the type of business you have, but usually they come in one of 3 forms. Usually it's some kind of website conversion that you're generating directly from your ads, or it's a phone call to your one of your locations or to your call center if you have that, or if somebody just shows up in person to your brick and mortar location. So you're spending money generating conversions. To take a data-driven approach to this, you need to have some kind of way to say, okay, this conversion was either not a sales lead or a sales lead. It turned into a sales opportunity. It converted to an appointment. It's a customer, a new customer, a repeat customer. Again, it depends on the business that you're running. But having some kind of way to get insights into the quality of the conversion you drove, and then that way you can determine the next best steps for that particular conversion. Should you retarget them, and if so, with what campaign? Should you put them in your lookalike targeting strategies, or should you exclude them, suppress them from seeing your ads in the future? But then taking all this into account, you can then make decisions on how to allocate your budget, optimize your messaging, etc., for the channels, campaigns, search keywords, web page variations, driving the biggest bang for your buck. Now, as I said, for most of us, this works very well when everything happens online. If somebody converts on your website, you're getting attribution for that directly within the ad platforms you're using, whether it's AdWords or Facebook, etc. Hopefully you're able to get some kind of way to follow those leads to know if they were a good lead or a bad lead. Then you can make all the other decisions that would come from that, as we talked about. But for many businesses, especially local businesses, a high percentage of your conversions are often a phone call. And this is sometimes for many brands or agencies where this process breaks down. You're not able to tell how many phone calls you're generating from these particular channels, so you're not able to then get the kind of analytics you need in order to have this process work properly. And it is a big deal. It's a big problem, especially for multi-location brands, people with brick and mortar locations, depending on your industry. But it is a big deal because as you're investing more and more in AdWords, Facebook, and display advertising, for most businesses, a lot of that spend is increasingly targeting mobile devices, targeting smartphones. You can see some data on the left. There's a huge growth expected in spending in the U.S. alone for mobile-targeted digital advertising for those channels. Now, desktop is expected to be relatively flat, but when you're talking about an increase in spend, you're talking about it usually going towards targeting smartphones, and that, of course, means an increase in pressure in being able to optimize for the conversions that come from that spend. And increasingly, as you see, those conversions are call conversions. A smartphone is, after all, still a phone, and it's often the easiest way for somebody to engage with you after engaging with your search, Facebook, or display advertising and visiting your website to call your business, whether that is a dealership or your branch or your store or even your call center if that's what you have. So you can see some of the data on the right that bears this out. In the U.S. alone, just from mobile advertising, we're talking about 48 billion calls from search ads to U.S. businesses, 29 from mobile display ads, and 19 billion from mobile social ads. So we're talking about a ton of conversions that are coming in from your mobile advertising. And it makes sense. I mean, this is particularly true for local search. Since this is an LSA webinar, local search is your bread and butter. You can see how the stats show, people who are searching for businesses near them, running local searches, are often doing that on a mobile device, on a smartphone. These are great audiences. They're engaged audiences. You can see that on the bottom, 18% of local searches on a smartphone lead to a purchase that day. High intent audiences, great audiences to target with your digital advertising versus 7% of non-local searches. And on the right, you can see how people who are running a search on their mobile phones are 40% more likely to call a business and 51% more likely to make a purchase. Again, calls are being generated, and these are great audiences to target. And there's more stats, of course, that bear this out. Forrester, the analyst firm, if you're familiar with them, they did a study recently that showed that customers who call a business often convert faster to a customer. They spend more, and they have a higher retention rate. They churn less. So it's a great audience for you to be targeting with your digital advertising, with your AdWords, Facebook, and display ads. And there's stats on the right that show, that someone who calls you, that's a very engaged audience. They convert at a much higher rate and influence a much larger spend than people who will convert online by filling out a form. This is true whether or not they engage with you on a smartphone or for many industries, which I know many of you fall into some of these categories. People will call you as part of the customer journey for businesses where if you're selling a product or service that is either complex, people have questions they need answered. If it's expensive, maybe they're a little reticent. They need to speak to a human being and get answers. If it's something they don't buy very often, they want to be able to talk to a human being before making a purchase, and especially if it's something that's urgent. So think about home services. If your roof's leaking or your air conditioner broke or you're locked out of your house or whatever it is, you're going to want to call and talk to somebody. You're not going to want to fill out a form and wait for those people to hopefully call you back. You're going to want to talk to somebody. So you can see some of the stats here. Many of the biggest digital advertisers in the U.S. fall into these categories. They care about phone calls as part of their customer journey. So if you're ignoring call conversions, it can really damage your ROI. That's part of what we're talking about here. The secret to optimizing digital advertising ROI is often a phone call, and ignoring those can have the other impact. It can be hurting your ROI because you can't prove your true return on investment or the full impact of your marketing campaigns and your marketing spend if you're not getting attribution or analytics around the phone calls you're driving. People who are coming to your site from these ads could be great and valuable visitors. They could be calling you, but in your analytics, they don't appear to be so. You could be allocating budget to channels, ads, or keywords that are driving, a good amount of online activity. But if you don't have insight into the call activity, you could be putting money into just the online ones where the valuable calls are being neglected, and you're pulling budget away from that. And at the end of the day, you don't know what action to take next with the caller. You don't know how to retarget them, if at all, if they're worth putting into lookalike campaigns. This is sort of a black hole for you. So that's really what we're going to be covering today, is how to use inbound calls as your secret weapon to optimize your ROI in what is a very competitive field right now with digital advertising, with spend going up. Businesses know how to optimize what happens online, but just by doing some of the same steps, optimizing, taking a data-driven approach to these calls you're generating to your locations or to your call center, you can really have a really measurable impact on optimizing and improving your ROI from these channels. So with all that set up, let me dive into what these strategies look like and give you as many examples as I can pack into this webinar. So a quick overview. I know it helps with, instead of just showing you slide after slide of strategies, it helps to sort of see how this all gets organized in one simple slide. So this is the what I like to call the digital or the online to phone to voice optimization cycle. So if you follow me on the left, step one, your digital advertising generates a call. So you can use what happens on that call. You can use the digital online interaction that drove that call in order to actually route that caller to the best location or agent and provide the right experience to that caller to help them convert to a customer. And we're going to cover detailed descriptions of what all of this means. The call happens, you routed them to the right place, they have a conversation with your location or with your call center, whatever it is that you're sending calls. You can then, as a marketer, get analytics into what happens on that conversation to understand what kind of call it was and use that analytics to determine step 4, the next steps. Should you retarget this caller with a relevant digital ad campaign, and if so, which one? And then hopefully that cycle increases again. You get that person to call you back, and step 1, you generate another call, and then this optimization cycle continues. Now, on the far right, you can see you can also take what's happening with this caller. If you have doing this for all your callers, you can then make pretty good decisions on how to allocate your media spend, optimize your website performance, your ad targeting, your call routing to drive the most customers at the lowest cost. So again, high-level overview of some of the strategies I'm going to be covering in more depth with hopefully some interesting examples for all of you. So step 1, generating the call. How do you generate a call? Well, the first thing is to make it easy as possible for online consumers to call you. Now, since this is a local search association, I'm probably talking a little basic on this particular slide, but obviously think about using call extensions in your paid search ads in order to make it easy for someone to call you directly from the search results. Google has a study that shows that 70% of mobile searchers have called businesses directly from their search results. So it makes sense to make it as easy as possible for someone who's ready to engage with you right away to be able to do that directly from the search results instead of clicking through to your website. Now, if they do click through to your website, it also makes sense to optimize your landing pages as well as your website content overall in order to make it easy for someone to call you. So there are 4 ways that you can do that, or these are just 4 examples of how you can do that. On the left, if you're sending somebody to your landing page from your paid search ad or your Facebook ad or your display ads, make it easy. Put a phone call as a prominent call to action. It doesn't have to be the only call to action, but putting it on that page is a great way to capture and convert those audiences that are wanting to call you, especially from your mobile campaigns. Step 2, if they click through onto your website, they leave your landing page, make it easy for them to call you by having a phone number option or a call button in your header or in the footer of your website. It doesn't take up a lot of space, it's very easy to do, and it's a great way to optimize your conversion rates by making it easy for someone to call you. If you're a multi-location brand, if you've got a bunch of stores or dealerships or branches or whatever it is, and you've got a way for people to find the location nearest them, also include that call option directly within those listings to make it easier for them to call directly from your location results. And then finally, there's no problem with using a web form, but if you do, why not include a call to action at the top to call you? So if somebody comes, they don't feel like filling out a form on their smartphones, they don't want to wait to be contacted by you, they want to call you right away, just by putting a simple phone number call to action at the top, taking up very little real estate, can have a big impact on optimizing your conversion rates from whatever digital ad program drove somebody to your website and your landing pages in the first place. So I wanted to give you some tips to test, to consider for call conversions. So the first one is, of course, target locations driving the most calls. So since this is LSA, I'm sure many of you are doing geolocated ad programs on search, display, Facebook. There's great options for that, probably targeting people who are near your brick and mortar locations, for example. If you're doing that, make sure that when you see the locations driving the most calls, you can then optimize your ad spend to increase your spend for those locations, those areas driving the most calls to those locations, so that you can capture that audience, making sure your paid search ad, for example, is front and center with a call extension for the places that want to call. Step 2, increasing bids for the best days and times that are driving the most calls. So making sure your ads appear when the days and times when people are most likely to call your business. So a good customer example of ours, one of the biggest plumbing companies, 600 locations across North America, they are able to see that by analyzing the calls and the days and times going, what are the days and times driving peak call volumes to their locations. They saw something really interesting, and that was that Friday and Saturdays actually had a call spike from their paid search ads. They didn't know that. They didn't realize that their paid search ads were driving a call spike on Fridays and Saturdays. So by optimizing for those times, they're able to generate higher conversions at a lower cost. Step 3, don't run call-focused ads when you're closed. So, this is kind of a no-brainer, but, your call-only ads, your call extension ads, or any ad campaign that you think is most likely to get somebody to call you, don't run that ad if no one's there to answer the phone. DialogTech recently did a study for a bunch of industries from our data that showed from hundreds of thousands of phone calls from paid search, 1 in 5 of those calls goes to voicemail. So this is not, and we analyzed the content of the message being left, and based on what was said on those calls, it indicated these people were good customers, had purchasing intent. So you're spending money to drive somebody to a voicemail box. Maybe not the optimum ad campaign for them when you're not closed. And lastly, compare calls from the search engine results page. So compare calls from call extensions versus people who click through and call your website, or call from your website. Their value could differ based on the type of industry you have. I'll give you two quick examples, contrasting examples from DialogTech customers. So a big logistics client of ours, when they analyzed calls from their paid search campaigns, their branded keyword campaigns, when people were calling from a call extension from a branded paid search campaign, they found out that 90% of those callers were actually looking for a job and not a customer, not somebody that they wanted to spend marketing dollars to generate. Now, conversely, one of the biggest pest control companies in the country also uses DialogTech, and by getting analytics around their calls driven from their website and comparing the results of those calls, the appointment set for pest control for those calls versus call extensions, they found that actually people who call from call extensions were converting at a higher rate, were a more valuable audience to them, the people who click through their website and call. So, it depends. Your industry, your business case could be different, but by having that data, you're able to make those meaningful optimization decisions around phone calls. So another great use case, a customer of ours, Sylvan Learning, they've got around 750 child tutoring locations across North America. Many of their conversions are phone calls, as you would expect, when a parent is trying to book to make an appointment and enroll their child into a tutoring service. They're going to want to call and talk to that location first. Now, they did a simple test by replacing their phone numbers on their site. One was an 800 number versus a local number. And just by switching out the 800 number with the local number, they found that they were driving 3 times more calls from their paid search campaigns with the local number. It might be different for you. That's why I'm saying test it. But by getting that data, it could be a simple trick to drive more conversions from your digital ad spend. So we talked a lot about getting data around the phone call, and a lot of these data-driven strategies require you to have the right data. So what is the right data that you should be capturing for calls that you're generating from your digital advertising? You could put it pretty much into 4 buckets. The first is what drove the call. What was the marketing channel that drove that particular call? Was it from Bing or AdWords or Facebook? Was it SEO? Was it some other channel? What specific ad generated the call? What search keywords, if it's a paid search ad, generated that call? And then if they clicked through to your website, what was that website interaction like? What was the page that they actually called from? Getting that data for each call. Then who the caller is, their name and phone number you can capture. What location, where in the country were they calling you from? Were they a new caller or a repeat caller? What device did they engage with your ads on and then call from? You can start to see how having this information connected to the call enables you to make some pretty impactful optimizations in your digital ad campaigns. And then once the call happens, having analytics around the caller experience. Where'd the call go? What location did it go to? Was the call actually answered? Did somebody actually answer the call that you paid money to drive to that location, for example? What was said on the call and by whom? How long did the call last can often be indicative of a quality conversation. But then ultimately being able to get value around based on what happened on the call. Was the call an actual sales lead or was it some other type of lead? Was it a services lead, a lead for service or support, for example? Was it a type of lead that you want to be spending money to generate more of? Did it convert to an appointment or a customer? And if not, what should you do next? And what was the overall value of the call? So having this kind of data, there are other data points you can collect too, but having this kind of data can really enable you to make some pretty impactful optimizations to your digital ad campaigns in order to drive ROI. Once you get this data, we should integrate it into the other marketing and ad platforms you're using in order to get the most value out of those platforms. So for example, passing that call data through into AdWords or Bing or Facebook, in order to be at a glance, be able to have call conversion data alongside your online conversion data and get a really true sense of the ROI you're generating from those platforms. Same thing with your analytics tools. If you're using Google Analytics or Adobe or any other kind of online analytics tool, being able to measure website behavior and having call data in that behavior as a column to say, okay, I can see that it drove this many web visits, this many calls, and being able to understand what's having a real impact. And then, I know many of you do use like bid management tools or optimization tools like DoubleClick or Marin, Quizio, Kenshu, Optimizely for A/B tests. If you're using those tools, being able to pass call data into those tools so they can make use of that data to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And then if you have a CRM system, passing that call data into the CRM with all of that attribution data together is able, then you can really see, okay, I generate this many calls from this channel, and then I can follow those calls through the sales cycle to say I generated this much revenue or this many opportunities or appointments from calls from this particular channel. So again, integrating that data, having all of this data to get a holistic view of the customer could be truly beneficial for optimizing your ROI. Two quick examples, some customers of ours. This particular one is one of the largest automakers in the world. They've got around 1,200 dealerships in the U.S. alone. They're able to, when they generate a call from their digital advertising, somebody comes to their website, they're sending that call to one of their dealerships. They're able to get that attribution data, the channel, the keyword search, the web page that drove that call. They're passing that data into Adobe Analytics, which is their analytics tool that they use, so they can see not just the call data along with people who are requesting quotes or contacts or online from the dealership, and then they can actually see, they're able to track the caller through to a visit to one of the dealerships, and then actually through to a purchase, a vehicle purchase. And by doing that, they're able to connect all those dots and say, okay, I know now that my website is generating a lot of calls to dealerships, so over 40,000 calls a month to dealerships. I know that these calls actually convert to showroom visits or appointments and actual purchases, actual vehicle purchases at a far higher rate than people who convert online. And by having that data, they can make some real great optimization decisions. Another quick example, it's not all, I didn't want to give you 100% local cases. So this is a call center use case, CDW. It's a really big provider of technology, products, and services. Your business might buy from them, for example. People who call for a lot of higher expense, people who look to purchase higher expense products often call and want to talk to CDW first with questions. They get attribution for that from their paid search. They pass that data at the keyword level into Adobe Media Optimizer, which is their bid management tool, and they're able to then have Media Optimizer allocate budget to the keywords driving the most calls, the best calls. And then by doing that, they were able to increase their ROI, increase the calls by an average of 13% each month. So we talked about generating calls. We talked about getting attribution analytics around the call. Now, it's really important that you, once you're generating those calls, as a marketer, there are actual steps that you can take to improve the caller experience. And this is important because what happens on the call ultimately determines your ROI. Now, as marketers, you're probably not answering the phone calls you're generating from your campaigns. You have no real impact, you might think, on the call experience, but you do. And I'm going to show you a couple of strategies that digital marketers now use to improve the caller experience for the call conversions they're generating. And why is that important? Because what happens on that conversation really has an impact on whether or not somebody becomes a customer. You can see some data here. 84% of callers would stop doing business with a company after a single negative call. 55% of people who intended to make a purchase have backed out due to poor customer service. So having a bad caller experience, no matter how great your online ad campaign was, can really hurt your ROI because you're not converting these people to appointments and to customers because the call experience is bad. And what is that? It means the calls weren't answered, obviously. That's a caller pain point if they're calling your business and no one's there to answer the call, or they have to wait on hold for too long, or no one answers the phone right away and they have to sort of wait. Callers passed from agent to agent because the agents can't help them. They're not being sent to the right people to help them. and the agent's not knowing why the caller is calling. That could be very frustrating. So I'm going to show you some strategies that digital marketers do use in order to optimize and personalize the caller experience. So many of you are probably personalizing your email campaigns or your ad campaigns or your website content, localizing it, personalizing it, doing your best to make it relevant to the people who are seeing it. You can also there are strategies you can do to personalize the caller experience. So the first one is we talked about all that data that you're capturing around what drove a call. You can actually set up rules that can say, okay, I'm going to route people differently based on where they're calling from or their keyword search or the channel or web page they called from. So for example, and if you're an insurance company, here's one example. Somebody runs a search for cheap car insurance in Illinois. They go to your website, they call you. You can automatically route them to the agent in charge of auto for Illinois, as opposed to having them be passed around until they got to the right person. Same thing for if they call it from a page about home insurance, for example. Route them to the people in charge of the home division. Or if they're a current customer with a claim, for example, and they're calling you, maybe route them first to the claims department. Get them, get them to the right people right away. On the right, an example for retail, a multi-location retailer. So if somebody calls from downtown Cincinnati, they're calling from downtown Cincinnati, you can route them to the closest store, their closest store. If they're calling when your stores are closed and you have a call center, route them directly to the call center. If they're calling, if they're a current customer calling you, maybe route them to an IVR to ask if they are checking on delivery. So these are actual strategies that you can set up to route somebody to the right agent, the right location, based on what you know about that caller at the time of the call. Now, an IVR is another strategy you can use. So if you think you're not sure, if you want to get information, ask people questions first before you route them on. An IVR, interactive voice response, is a great way to do that. Most of you know what this is. It's an automated voice menu that can ask questions to somebody and have them, ask qualifying questions or have them decide how they want to be routed. So one example, customer of ours, Sleep Train, they've got 300 stores, mattress stores on the West Coast. They generate around 10,000 calls a month from their marketing. They use an IVR that's pretty simple. Press 1 for the store nearest you. So if somebody presses 1, they get automatically routed to the closest store to where they are currently located. If they press 2, they can try to order over the phone or learn about financing with press 3. Those people get routed to a call center. So again, it's a great way to get the person to the right place right away to help them and help them hopefully convert to a customer. Another tactic you can use is to prioritize callers from your best converting programs. So if you have a call center, for example, and you get a bunch of calls, people are waiting in line. If you know from your call data that people who convert and call you from your paid search ads, for example, convert to customers at a higher rate, they're a more valuable audience, why don't bump them up in the queues? They have to wait less. Or put them in a special queue that ensures they get answered by agents right away, and put everyone else into a regular queue. Answering calls quickly from your most valuable audiences is a proven way to increase revenue rates, conversion rates over the phone. And this is one way you could do that because you know the data at the time of the call about what generated that call. Another great tactic that people use is to arm their sales agents or their locations with insights on the caller before they answer the call. So the call is generated, it's being sent to a location, a store, or it's being sent to your call center. You are able to tell those people who's calling and why. This is one example. Somebody runs a search for cheap car insurance. They go to the website, they call. That call goes into a call center, for example. This pop-up occurs that shows who the person is, where they're calling from, downtown Chicago. They came in from Google for the ad group Auto Chicago. They searched cheap car insurance. The agent then it says, okay, I accept the call, I'm answering it. They can go right into the conversation framed best based on this person. So think about the transition, if you're the shopper here, you've searched for cheap car insurance, you've got an ad targeted towards what you're looking for, you've gone to a page that gives you, a great incentive to convert. This is all perfect. You call, then this person who answers the phone automatically knows why you're calling. It's a seamless transition from online to voice, and hopefully they can have a great conversation right away to get that conversion. Now, you've generated the calls, you're passing the people right away to the best people, arming them with intelligence on how to best address that caller. Now, as marketers, it's important that you actually get insights into what happens on those conversations in order to make some important determinations. So answering questions like, was the call answered? Was it a quality sales lead? Is this a first time or a repeat caller? Because a lot of our campaigns are geared towards generating one or the other. What did the caller actually say? What did the agent say? How did they perform? And what was the outcome of the call? These are all, if you have answers to these, you're able to make some great determinations to optimize your marketing. There are two ways that you can do this. One is manually by getting recordings and transcriptions of the call. So services, you can record or transcribe the phone call. And then as marketers, to any location, as marketers, then you can drill in to that location and say, okay, here are all the calls I sent. Here's the recording I can listen to. Here's what people said. And I can then manually understand, okay, this is a good call. This person asked for a demo. They asked for an appointment. Or a bad call. It wasn't a sales call. Didn't last very long. Or the agent said the wrong things. Why did the agent not mention this particular promotion or ask this person for a test drive or for an appointment? Analytics as marketers you can get. Or obviously if you're generating a ton of calls and you don't have the resources to listen to recordings or transcriptions, most people don't, you can actually have AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning analyze these call recordings and transcriptions for you and score them and provide insights for you as to whether or not it was a good call, was a sales call, it was how the agent performed, did they convert the person, and much more. So I'm going to go into a couple examples of this, but for some, you've all heard about AI with marketing. This is a pretty easy application for AI, applying it to analyzing the voice conversations and determining marketing insights from that. So one example, a customer of ours, Comfort Keepers, they're a multi-location senior care provider, so they provide in-home care for your elderly loved ones. Obviously, people who are booking appointments and customers want to have a conversation with Comfort Keepers because you're talking about a loved one here and their care. So phone call conversions are important conversions. The national marketing team for Comfort Keepers sends calls to around 450 franchisee locations. So they're able to use AI to analyze the quality of those calls. Did the calls I'm sending to each location, was it a new customer, for example, or was it a call from a current customer? Or was it some other type of call, a solicitation, for example? And then if it was a new customer, was it a good lead or a bad lead? The AI can tell by analyzing the words spoken on the call what classification the person can fall into. And then Comfort Keepers can then prove their value to the franchisees by saying, I sent you this many good leads over the phone this week or this month. And then they can also determine how best to retarget or use that particular caller's data in order to improve their campaign. Now, another example, Sylvan, I mentioned them before. They've got around 800 locations in North America, child tutoring provider. The national marketing team, if they see that one particular location is underperforming, not getting the right kind of enrollments for the month, they're able to drill into those conversations for that particular location and then say, okay, are more calls than normal going to voicemail? Are my calls getting answered? If they are, if they are going to voicemail, it's a clear potential problem about why this location isn't getting the right kind of enrollments. Are they mentioning national offers or promotions? Again, another clear indication that if they're not saying the right things on the phone, they're not giving themselves the best chance for success. And are the leads that I'm sending them over the phone good leads or bad leads? By drilling into this data, for their locations, we're talking about somebody who could be sitting, say, in downtown Seattle, but looking at calls going everywhere to multi-locations and getting real insight into what's happening in order to help see why one location is not performing as well as they could, and then making recommendations to help them, step up their game. Another example, Central Restaurant Products. So this is a leading provider of food service equipment. We're talking about fridges, fryers, freezers, all types of equipment that restaurants use. It's a good B2B use case. Many of their orders that come in through phone calls because people want to ask questions about these, expensive or infrequent purchases. The marketing team actually looks at the questions that are asked on the calls for each product, and then they're taking those questions and using that data to improve the content of the product page. So if someone's asking a particular question that's not covered on the product page, they're going in and optimizing that product page in order to answer that question and hopefully do a better job of generating conversions because it's a much more compelling messaging on that particular product page. So again, generating calls, getting data, analyzing conversations. Now, for each caller, if they were a good call, if they're a good sales lead, if they converted to a customer, what stage in the customer journey they are, you're able then to determine, okay, I can then know how to put those particular callers into my audience targeting campaigns. Many people now use pretty detailed audience targeting campaigns, so you can retarget people or upsell or cross-sell people with your campaigns, your Facebook or your paid search or display lookalike campaigns. So for example, now okay, this person called but they're a good lead, but they didn't convert to a customer. I can then retarget them across my digital ad campaigns with a particular message to appeal to them, to get them to re-engage with me and hopefully become a customer. That could be a special offer, for example, whatever it is. If you know that they called, but this caller actually purchased a particular product, maybe then you can then put them into your upsell or cross-sell campaign. So for example, they called and then they end up buying a car from you. Okay, let's put them into the right upsell or cross-sell campaign for maintenance services, for example. If they if they called you and you know that they were a good caller, maybe then you could put them into a lookalike campaign. Use those, find other people that are like this particular caller because they're a good, valuable caller, and show them your ads. Or if they're a bad caller, for example, or if they became a customer, or if they're just not right for certain campaigns, you know that you can suppress them. I'm going to exclude these people from seeing my ads moving forward. There's somebody who called looking for a job, whatever. I'm not going to show them my particular ads anymore. Now, I would also recommend, if you can, I would recommend separating your callers out from your online conversions for each of those campaigns and targeting people with unique campaigns generated specifically for callers. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. But the reason why you might want to do this is because someone who calls you is a valuable signal that could indicate, one, how they want to convert. It can tell you that, okay, this person prefers to call me. That's valuable insight to have. It can also tell you the value of that call. Maybe I want to retarget them with specific, how much to spend on that particular person. And then, the best landing page and ad messaging as well for somebody who wants to call versus somebody who shows that they prefer to convert online. So let me show you an example. Someone calls you, they don't become a customer, but you know that they like to call you. For your search ad campaign, like Sears here, why not show them an ad that speaks to their preference to call you? So have a call to action in your messaging, in your retargeting campaign that says call today for a special offer, and then have a call extension show up as well. And you can see other examples like a call-only ad. Maybe you don't want to use call-only ads if you don't know this person likes to call or that they're a qualified caller, but now maybe put them into a call-only ad campaign. For example, or Google is great about having all kinds of ad formats to drive calls directly from the search results page. If you know somebody wants to call, why not retarget them with these particular ad formats? Facebook also has this option. So if you know somebody wants to call from your Facebook ads, maybe retarget them with a call now button. So here's an example. of a customer of ours, Satva Mattress, who, you can either Shop Now will take you to their landing page where you can either call or fill out a form, or you can call now directly from their Facebook ad. Now, the example on the right, is a display ad campaign. If you know somebody wants to call you, why not just tweak your messaging in your ad to get a better chance of getting that call? So, same ad here for Gerber Life Insurance, but one, instead of saying get a quote, says call now. People will still click on the ad and go to the site, but this is one way to say, okay, maybe I can get fish, get more fish in my net by targeting people who I know want to call me with a call now message. So, what this might look like as well for lookalike audiences, a customer of ours, I mentioned Comfort Keepers, they do this. So when someone calls and it's somebody calls and then converts and becomes a customer, they can take that person's data and use that in lookalike campaigns in order to find similar people to show their display ad campaigns to, for example. And then you can see here they have a great call to action for this person. Talk to a Comfort Keeper today, with the expectation that you can actually have a conversation with a Comfort Keeper, a new audience that you think resembles somebody who likes to call. Put a good call-focused ad campaign in front of them in your lookalike campaigns and see the results. For Comfort Keepers, it actually generated 4 times the calls in the next best targeting strategy. So again, effective campaign. So I'm going to wrap it up with a quick customer example, multi-location brand, Roy's Restaurant, and also their agency that's working with them, Roger West. So if you're not familiar with Roy's, they are an upscale restaurant chain with 21 locations across the United States. They went to agency Roger West to help them with their paid search and display campaigns. And the goal of these campaigns for Roy's is to generate reservations for each of their locations. Now, Roy's knew beforehand that people were calling and making reservations, but they weren't sure what marketing channels or strategies were having an impact to drive those reservations. They needed that kind of information in order to optimize their campaigns. So Roger West and Roy's then used us, DialogTech, to get that analytics data from source to outcome. Now let me show you what some of those, the data they captured and how they were able to use that data to make an impact. So for Roy's and Roger West, when somebody called, they're able to know the marketing channel that drove the call, what ad it was, what device, was it from a desktop ad versus a mobile ad, what search keywords, if it was a paid search ad, if the call came from a call extension versus somebody who clicked through and called from the web page, they've got that data, the time and day of the call, which restaurant the caller was calling, as well as the caller ID, the caller's phone number. So all that data for each of their callers. And then when the call happened, the conversation occurred, they're able to then connect that data to the outcome. So was the call answered by the restaurant? How many rings before the call was answered? And I'll mention a little bit more on that in a second. How long did the call last? A longer call could be indicative of a more quality call. What was said on the call? And I'll show you examples of what that looks like in a second. And did the call result in a reservation? Was it the kind of call they want to be spending money to generate? So here's some of the data, what they learned from the insights they got from that data, and then what they did, how that was an actionable insight in order to improve performance. So as you can see here, they found out by looking at the data from calls that many reservation calls come from mobile paid search on Fridays between the hours of 2 and 5. That's great to know. Mobile paid search campaigns are generating calls and reservations between 2 and 5 on Fridays. They can then optimize their spend to make sure their ads are front and center during those high converting times. They also found that 70% of calls were 1 minute or longer, and that when they included the words reserve or reservation. The customer was speaking the words reserve or reservation. Great data to know. You can then optimize your keywords and ad copy and your targeting based on driving a longer, find out what's driving these longer calls, and then spend more money on those channels, ads, and keywords that are doing it. They also found out that even though non-branded terms were more expensive, people who were calling from their non-branded keyword terms were actually making reservations, and they were first-time visitors. So they're actually first-time callers, first-time reservations. And for a restaurant, that's a very valuable audience, getting those first-time callers. After that, people can call you from your SEO, or they might go directly to your restaurant. But being able to target non-branded terms to get those first-time visitors was a worthwhile spend, even though it's a bit more expensive, so they were able to justify that expense. And then some locations had ring times that were over 20 seconds before the call was answered. So think about you're calling a restaurant and it takes 20 seconds before somebody answers that call. That's not a good experience. Yeah, Roy's and Roger West was able to go coach those locations to make answering phones quickly a priority and providing a better caller experience. They were then getting attribution and analytics around the caller and putting that into their targeting campaign. So they were retargeting people who visited the site and either called or converted online, but they were able to retarget them with display campaigns, for example, or retargeting people based on customers who previously called, being able to put them into the right campaign to get them to come back for their display campaign. And using lookalikes as well, being able to find people who are similar to customers who have called from this particular campaign and made a reservation. They can then target people that look like that with some great incentivized display paid search campaigns. End of the day, all this data, all these optimizations, they're making pretty impressive ROI increases. 461% increase in calls in the first 7 months, 434% increase in reservations at their restaurants, and a 38% decrease in cost per reservation. Not just great results, but a decreased cost per reservation because they're able to take some of these data-driven strategies. So again, that's what we're talking about. What's the secret to increasing ROI from your channels? For many businesses, it's just taking a real close look at your calls and taking some of these steps that I talked about and in order to get the right data, make the right optimization, do the right routing, provide the right caller experience, retarget the right callers the right way, and then optimize your spend. If you do all this, if you're not doing it now and you take some of these strategies to heart and try them, it's highly unlikely you won't see a nice increase in ROI. So that's the webinar. There's a little time for Q&A, but before I bring Joe back in, I wanted to say if you want more information on some of these strategies and other stories, success stories, just go to the DialogTech website. You can go to DialogTech/DTU, DialogTech University. That's our educational arm. We've got some great ebooks that you can look at on the DialogTech website as well. And if you are interested in getting a walkthrough of our platform, looking at some of this call analytics data for yourself, some of the reports, how you can use it, please visit our website at dialogtech.com and give us a call or chat us or schedule a demo online.
Thanks, Blair, for conducting the webinar today, and thanks for everyone for attending. If you have any questions or want to be connected with today's speaker, you can simply email us at webinars@thelsa.org. And also for a look at what's coming and to access all of our past webinars, visit www.thelsa.org/webinars. So with that, thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.